There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from your body, it comes from your spirit. It's the kind you feel when you've been trying for too long, holding things together, fixing what keeps breaking, carrying weight that never seems to get lighter. You keep showing up, keep pushing forward, keep telling yourself that if you just stay strong a little longer, something will finally change. But deep down, something feels off, because no matter how hard you fight, the same battles keep coming back. The same pressure, the same frustration, the same quiet sense that you're losing energy faster than you're gaining ground. And you don't always say it out loud, but you feel it. This isn't how it's supposed to be. The truth is, not every battle in your life is yours to fight. Some of the things you've been wrestling with, God never asked you to carry. Some of the pressure you feel was never meant to sit on your shoulders. And the more you try to control it, the heavier it becomes. That's why you feel drained. Not because you're weak, not because you don't have faith, but because you've been fighting in a place where grace was never meant to meet you. There comes a moment when something inside you starts to shift. You begin to realize that all your effort hasn't brought the peace you were hoping for. And instead of pushing harder, something in you begins to loosen its grip. You don't fully understand it yet, but you can feel it. The need to control everything starts to fade. The urgency begins to slow down. And for the first time in a while, you consider the possibility that letting go might not be losing. It might be the beginning of something else. Because according to the Bible, when you stop fighting the wrong battles, heaven doesn't stay still. God begins to move, not always in loud, obvious ways, but in quiet, precise moments that start to change things from the inside out. Situations begin to shift, doors begin to open, and a kind of peace starts to rise that doesn't depend on everything being perfect. But most people never get to that moment, because they never stop fighting. So stay with me, because what happens after you finally let go is not what you expect. It's deeper than relief. It's stronger than effort. And it might be exactly what your life has been missing. Number 1. Why fighting the wrong battles leaves you drained. There's a difference between a battle that builds you and a battle that slowly breaks you. Crow. And if you pay attention to how you've been feeling lately, you can tell which one you're in. Because when you're fighting something God actually called you to face, there's a strange kind of strength that comes with it. It's not easy, but there's clarity. There's purpose. Even in the pressure, you can feel that God is with you in it. But when you're fighting the wrong battles, everything feels heavy. You wake up already tired. Your mind keeps running in circles. You replay conversations. You try to predict outcomes. You carry situations that haven't even happened yet. And no matter how much you think about it, work on it, or try to fix it, nothing really changes. It just drains you. And the reason is simple. Even if it's hard to accept, God never gave you the strength for something He never asked you to carry. Long beat you, that pressure you feel to control everything, that fear that makes you hold on tighter, that constant need to figure it all out, those are not coming from Him. The Bible shows us again and again that when God leads you into something, He also sustains you in it. But when you step outside of that place, when you take on responsibilities that belong to Him, you end up fighting in your own strength, and your own strength has limits. Think about how often you've been trying to force something to work, a relationship, a situation, an outcome you thought had to happen a certain way. You keep pushing, adjusting, trying again, but deep down, there's no peace in it. That's one of the clearest signs, because when something is aligned with God, even when it's hard, there is still peace underneath it. But when it's not, you feel tension, anxiety, and a constant sense that you have to make it happen yourself. And that's exhausting. You weren't created to carry everything. You weren't meant to solve every problem. You weren't designed to hold your life together by force. But somewhere along the way, you started believing you had to, and now your spirit is paying the price for it. This is why so many people feel stuck. Not because they're not trying hard enough, but because they're trying too hard in the wrong place, fighting battles that were never assigned to them. And the longer you stay there, the more drained you become, until something in you finally realizes this isn't working. And that realization is where everything begins to change. Number 2. The moment you finally let go, there comes a point where you just can't keep doing it the same way anymore. Not because you suddenly lost your strength, but because you've run out of energy trying to control something that refuses to change. You've thought it through 100 times. You've tried every angle you could think of. You've pushed, held on, and told yourself to stay strong. But inside, you know the truth. You're tired, and in that moment, something shifts. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's real. You begin to loosen your grip, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to realize that holding on tighter isn't the answer. For the first time, you stop trying to force the outcome. You stop trying to control every detail. You stop trying to carry what's been crushing you, and you let go. That moment is often misunderstood. People think letting go means giving up. They think it means you don't care anymore. They think it means you've lost. But in reality, it's the opposite. Letting go is an act of trust. It's you stepping back and saying, Jesus, this is bigger than me, and I can't carry it the way I've been trying to. It's not weakness, it's surrender. And surrender is where things begin to change. Because the moment you release what was never yours to control, you make room for God to step in. And here's what most people don't realize. God will not compete with your control. As long as you're trying to hold everything together in your own strength, you're blocking the very help you've been praying for. But the moment you step back, the moment you stop forcing, the moment you finally say, I trust you with this, everything begins to open. Not always on the outside immediately, but something powerful starts to move inside you, around you, beyond what you can see. Because letting go doesn't end the story. It begins a new one. And what happens next is something most people never experience, simply because they never reach this point. Number 3. What Jesus starts doing in the silence. After you let go, there's a moment that can feel confusing because everything gets quiet. You expected something to happen immediately. You thought there would be a clear sign, a visible change, something you could point to and say, this is it. But instead, there's silence. And for many people, this is where doubt starts to creep in. You begin to wonder if you made the wrong decision. You question whether God is really doing anything. You feel the temptation to go back and pick up what you just released, just to feel some sense of control again. But this is the moment where faith becomes real. Because just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. In the Bible, some of the most powerful things God did happened in silence first. Before David stepped into his calling, he was alone in the fields. Before Joseph's life turned around, he sat in a prison with no answers. Even Jesus, before stepping into his public ministry, spent time in quiet preparation. God doesn't rush the process. He prepares it. And when you let go of the wrong battles, Jesus begins to move in ways that are not loud, but precise. He starts shifting things behind the scenes. He begins to remove what doesn't belong in your life. He starts aligning people, situations, and timing in ways you could never force. But from your perspective, it just feels quiet, and that quiet can feel uncomfortable because you've been so used to fighting, pushing, reacting, that stillness feels like something is missing. But what if nothing is missing? What if this silence is actually the space where God is working the most? The truth is, when you stop fighting the wrong battles, you step into a place where God takes over what you could never control. And He does it without chaos, without pressure, without draining you. He works in a way that brings order, not confusion. So if you're in that quiet place right now, don't panic. Don't rush to fill it. Don't go back to what was exhausting you. Because this silence is not emptiness, it's preparation. And what Jesus is setting in motion right now will soon become visible in ways you didn't expect. Number 4. The shift you begin to feel inside. Before anything changes around you, something begins to change within you, and it's subtle at first. You wake up one day and realize you're not as anxious as you were before. The thoughts that used to overwhelm you don't have the same power anymore. The situation hasn't fully changed yet, but somehow you have. And that's the shift. It doesn't start on the outside. It starts inside your spirit. Because when you stop fighting what God never asked you to fight, you step into a different kind of strength. Not the strength of trying harder, not the strength of forcing things to work, but the strength that comes from peace. The Bible describes it as peace that surpasses understanding, and that's exactly what it feels like. You can't fully explain it. It doesn't match your circumstances, but it's there, and it's steady. You begin to respond differently. Things that used to trigger you don't affect you the same way. You're not reacting out of fear anymore. You're not making decisions out of pressure. Instead, there's a calm confidence rising in you, a sense that you don't have to control everything anymore. And this is where many people get surprised, because they were waiting for their situation to change first. They thought peace would come after everything was fixed. But God doesn't work that way. He gives you peace first, and then He begins to change what's around you. Because if your circumstances changed without your spirit changing, you would just go back to the same patterns. So He transforms you from the inside out. And as that shift continues, you start to realize something powerful. You're no longer carrying what used to weigh you down. You're no longer fighting to hold everything together. You're standing, but with a different posture. Not tense, not overwhelmed, but grounded. Because now, your strength is no longer coming from you. It's coming from the fact that you finally stepped out of the wrong battle and into the place where God is leading. And that changes everything. Number 5. Why the enemy suddenly goes quiet. There's something that often surprises people at this stage. After all the noise, after all the pressure, after everything that felt overwhelming, things begin to quiet down. And at first it almost feels strange, because you were used to the constant tension. You were used to the inner battles, the overthinking, the feeling that something was always wrong or about to go wrong. But now, it's different. The thoughts don't come as aggressively. The pressure doesn't feel as intense. The weight that used to sit on your chest starts to lift, and you begin to wonder, why does it feel so quiet now? The answer is deeper than it seems, because when you were fighting the wrong battles, you were exactly where the enemy wanted you. Distracted, drained, focused on things that pulled you away from God's direction. You were putting your energy into struggles that had no real purpose, battles that didn't move your life forward, but only kept you stuck. And as long as you stayed there, the noise continued. But the moment you stepped out of that place, the moment you let go and turned your focus back to Jesus, you broke that cycle. You stopped engaging with what was never meant for you. And when you stop feeding something, it loses its power. The enemy doesn't need to fight you the same way anymore, because you're no longer participating in the fight he set up. That's why things go quiet, not because nothing is happening, but because you've moved out of the battlefield that was draining you. And this quiet is not something to be afraid of. It's a sign that you're no longer reacting to every distraction, a sign that your focus has shifted, a sign that you're no longer easily pulled into battles that don't belong to you. But here's the important part. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean the journey is over. In fact, this is where clarity begins, because without all the noise, you can finally hear what truly matters. And that leads you into the next step, where things don't just feel different inside. They begin to change around you. Number 6. Doors begin to open without force. This is where it becomes undeniable, because what you couldn't force before starts to move on its own. Situations that felt stuck begin to shift. Opportunities appear in ways you didn't plan. Conversations happen at the right time, with the right people, and you find yourself stepping into things without the same struggle you used to have. Before, everything felt like resistance. You had to push, you had to convince, you had to make things happen. But now, there's a different flow. It's not that everything becomes easy overnight, but there's alignment. You're no longer trying to break down doors. You're walking through the ones that are opening, and that's a completely different experience. Because when God is leading, you don't have to force your way forward. The Bible shows us this pattern again and again. When the time was right, doors opened for Joseph that no one could shut. When God called Moses, the path was made clear, step by step. And when Jesus moved, things aligned in ways that didn't require striving or pressure. That's how you know the difference. When it's from you, there's stress, urgency, and constant effort. When it's from God, there's peace, timing, and a sense that you're being guided. And as these doors begin to open, you start to understand something you didn't fully see before. You were never meant to force your life into place. You were meant to walk with God and trust that He knows how to position you exactly where you need to be. And when you do that, you don't just move forward. You move forward with purpose, without the weight, without the confusion, without the constant pressure to make everything happen on your own. Because now, you're no longer fighting your way through life. You're being led through it, and that changes everything about how you move from this point on. Number 7. You step into a different kind of strength. By the time you reach this point, you start to notice something that is hard to explain, but impossible to ignore. You're still in the same life, but you're not the same person anymore. The things that used to shake you don't have the same effect. The situations that once drained you no longer control your emotions. The pressure that used to follow you everywhere has lost its grip. And it's not because everything around you suddenly became perfect. It's because something inside you has changed. You've stepped into a different kind of strength, not the kind that comes from trying harder, not the kind that depends on your ability to hold everything together, but the kind that comes from finally letting go. This strength is quiet. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't react to everything. It doesn't rush to fix what God is already handling. Instead, it stands, steady, grounded, at peace. You begin to move differently. You don't chase every opportunity anymore. You discern which ones are meant for you. You don't respond to every problem with urgency. You pause, you pray, and you trust. You don't carry everything on your shoulders. You release what was never yours to begin with. And in doing that, you discover something powerful. You were never meant to live in constant struggle. You were meant to walk in alignment, because when you're aligned with God's direction, you don't have to fight for everything. You only have to be faithful in what He actually placed in front of you, and that changes how you see everything. You're no longer driven by fear. You're no longer controlled by pressure. You're no longer trapped in cycles of trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. Instead, you're walking with clarity, with peace, with a confidence that doesn't come from knowing every answer, but from trusting the one who does. And that is a strength most people spend their entire lives trying to find. Conclusion. So if you've been feeling drained, if you've been carrying more than you can handle, if you've been fighting battles that never seem to end, this might be the moment you've been needing. Not to try harder, not to push more, but to finally stop. Because the moment you stop fighting the wrong battles is the moment your life begins to change in ways you couldn't force before. It's the moment peace starts to rise where anxiety once lived. It's the moment clarity replaces confusion. It's the moment you step out of pressure and into purpose. And no, it doesn't mean everything changes instantly, but it does mean something deeper has shifted. You're no longer carrying what was breaking you. You're no longer trapped in cycles that were draining you. You're no longer fighting alone, because now you've made space for God to move. And when God begins to move, He does it in ways that don't depend on your strength. He opens what you couldn't open. He restores what you couldn't fix. He leads you where you couldn't see, all because you were willing to let go. So don't go back to what exhausted you. Don't pick up what you already released. Stay in this place. Trust what God is doing, even when you don't fully understand it yet. Because what happens next is not something you fight for. It's something you step into. And this time, you won't have to carry it alone.